CNN has this headline, and they're talking about new surveillance video. Shows what happened in the moments before the fatal ICE shooting. So you know what they have found? I can't believe they actually said this. They show that Renee Good's SUV was in the street, parked sideways, blocking the road for at least 3 minutes. But then CNN says, we don't know why she was blocking the road, but she was. Are you kidding me? You know why Renee Good was blocking the road, because she was trying to impede ICE from doing their job. And so one of the things, and I had an earlier headline from CNN, outrage after ICE shoots and kills woman. Well, the outrage, there's a couple of different reasons to be outraged. My outrage is the fact that I agree, man, this was absolutely preventable. Why was she out on the road? Why are the Democrats and the Democrat politicians like Jacob Fry, the mayor of Minneapolis, and the governor, Tim Walz, and people like Gavin Newsom and AOC and people like that, why are they emboldening people to get in their cars and try to prevent ICE from doing their job? And people are screaming, oh, there's going to be, Renee Good had a 6-year-old. There's going to be a 6-year-old that's orphaned now. Well, let me tell you something, friends. If I've got a 6-year-old or an 8-year-old or a 9-year-old or a 10-year-old, if I've got children that I care about, I'm not going to put myself in a position where it could theoretically or realistically put me in a dangerous position. And that is exactly what Renee Good did. Now, if you go to my X feed at Dan Mandis Show, I'm assuming all of you have already seen the video. If you want to see multiple views of the video, knock yourself out. It is on my X feed at Dan Mandis Show. But it is clear that number of things. She was in her vehicle. It is sideways on the road, and she is impeding traffic, i.e. ICE. An ICE officer walks up to the vehicle and tells her to get out of the car. Now, I'm assuming that she had been a pain in the butt for quite some time, throughout the day with ICE, because apparently, according to one witness, I played you the audio earlier, a witness says, yeah, she and other cars, they were purposely impeding ICE from driving around the city. So ICE was already good and ticked off because of what they were doing. And so, she gets in front of them and they finally say, get out of the car. And she refuses to get out of the car. As a matter of fact, she starts driving towards another ICE agent. And there's angles that show that the ICE agent was actually bumped by the car. And then the shots rang out and she ultimately ended up dead. Incredibly sad. For a number of different reasons. Tim Walz, there's audio out there. I played it earlier. Tim Walz, oh, this was so preventable. You're darn right it was preventable. She shouldn't have put herself in that position. And at least to me, it was clearly self-defense. But this is falling along political lines. If you're a supporter of ICE and you're a supporter of Donald Trump, then you claim that it was self-defense. I believe that it was self-defense. I'm a huge supporter of ICE and their mission. I'm a huge supporter of Donald Trump. If you're anti-Trump, orange man bad, and we should fill our nation with as many illegal aliens as possible, well, then you think that it was murder. Now, the reality is, if you look very closely at the tape, you will see that she was trying to make a hard sort of right turn, if you will. But she's already driving towards the police officer, and he obviously was fixated on the person driving a 2-ton vehicle or however much it weighed right at him. And so he did what he had to do to defend himself. And now we've got all of these activist groups and these pro-Palestinian groups that are heading towards Minnesota if they're not already there. So we may end up seeing, we had burning flags overnight and, we didn't see any widespread rioting or vandalism. Maybe we saw a little bit of vandalism. I don't know. We didn't.
They haven't been bussed in yet.
That's what I was going to say. They haven't been bussed in yet. So they're probably flying in this morning. And so it is Thursday. So we've got Thursday night, Friday night, and then the weekend.
Yeah.
Now, Tim Walz is out there. He's calling in the National Guard. I want to play some audio. This is the Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey.
We've dreaded this moment since the early stages of this ICE presence in Minneapolis. Not only is this a concern that we've had internally, we've been talking about it. They are not here to cause safety in this city. What they are doing is not to provide safety in America. What they are doing is causing chaos and distrust. They're ripping families apart. They're sowing chaos on our streets. And in this case, quite literally killing people.
And one of the things that he said, I can't play the audio because it's got a curse word in it, but one of the things that he said is that ICE agents are saying it was self-defense, and Jacob Frey says that is BS. You got to be careful. Jonathan Turley is actually out there, and he is saying that he better be careful. Jacob Frey better be careful. This is the headline. Jonathan Turley explains why Mayor Jacob Frey might want to STFU about accusing ICE of murder, because he could ultimately end up face some sort of legal repercussions himself. Here's what's going to happen, is that whether it is Tim Walz or whether it is Greg Frey or whether it is Gavin Newsom, AOC, all the usual suspects, the more that they try to gin up people, the worse it's going to be. Not for them. They love the attention. They love the clicks, and they thrive on divisive grievance politics. But when you start talking about the people that suffer the consequences, people like Renee Good, they ultimately end up paying the price because they make the decision to go out and use their vehicle to try to stop ICE. I love what Jonathan Turley said. Talking about Jacob Frey, this is the type of rhetoric that fuels the rage. Perhaps, he says, wait for the investigation. And that's the point. The point is that Jacob Frey is spouting off when he doesn't know all the facts and he doesn't know everything that has transpired. Now, obviously, everybody was looking at this video. Everybody saw the video. And it depends, I believe, on your, where you stand politically, how you interpret that video. But wait till you hear what Scott Jennings had to say over on CNN. Very good. As far as your weather today, eventually we're going to get up to 70 degrees, cloudy and warm, and yes, a high of 70. Appreciate you listening to Nashville's Morning News on Super Talk. By the way, talking about Jacob Frey and his very divisive commentary.
To ICE, get the out of Minneapolis. We do not want you here. Your stated reason for being in this city is to create some kind of safety, and you are doing exactly the opposite.
So my question would be this. Is there any culpability of these politicians for trying to, as I've been saying, gin up all of this anger and all of this hatred? You see, I believe that is what they are trying to do. Democrats thrive on division. Democrats thrive on chaos. Democrats thrive on just this kind of environment because now Renee Good is a victim. And she gets to be treated as a victim, even though it was her that put herself in this position, driving a vehicle directly at an ICE officer who then had to defend himself. But Scott Jennings had a great point. It's one that I did make earlier, where all of this rhetoric for people on the left, When did it just become okay that your right to protest, and I'm air quoting, your right to protest was actually turned into taking your vehicle and blocking ICE agents and try to impede ICE agents from doing their job? Your right to protest is you with a sign over there on the sidewalk, whatever. Your right to protest does not include you in a caravan of people trying to stop ICE agents or throwing rocks and bricks and all kinds of other things at ICE agents. That is not part of your, right to free speech and your right to protest.
But it strikes me that we are undergoing an epidemic of political vigilantism right now. Why are people showing up in vehicles, in convoys, not just in Minneapolis, but all over the country in an effort to obstruct lawful federal law enforcement activities?
Yep.
This is not an isolated incident. We have had hundreds of car rammings against ICE agents all over the country. According to DHS, this lady in this car today, along with other vehicles, had been tracking ICE agents around. Why are people believing that they can drive their car into a federal law enforcement situation and that is an appropriate thing to do? I understand they don't like the fact that these agents are enforcing existing immigration law. But that's not how we change laws in this country. If you don't like a law, you talk to the politicians. You don't drive your car into the middle of a building or a law enforcement situation that's being occupied by the people who are simply there to enforce the law. If I don't like how much the IRS is charging me in taxes, I don't drive my car into the Treasury Department and try to run somebody over. I call my congressman.
Exactly.
Political vigilantism is being encouraged by Democratic officials like the Lieutenant Governor of Minnesota, Peggy Flanagan, who earlier this year told people to, quote, put your bodies on the line, and Tim Walz calling these guys Gestapo all year. What do you think happens when you radicalize a base of people about?
Yeah, listen, he's absolutely right. And I will remind you what Jacob Fry said yesterday when he said
To ICE, get the out of Minneapolis.
He thinks
we do not want you here. Your stated reason for being in this city is to create some kind of safety, and you are doing exactly the opposite.
So we're just waiting for the next shoe to drop because, as I said, you've got all of these, and this was from, I believe, the Wall Street Journal, where they start talking about all of these groups that are going to be coming into, if they're not already there, Minneapolis. Now, witnesses have claimed that Good and her wife were acting as legal observers and filming the protest when she was just innocently shot 3 times in the face at a protest in Minneapolis on Wednesday. Her actions were not innocent, as we've been documenting since, I'm assuming, all day yesterday. She was in the way of an ICE vehicle, driving right towards an ICE officer. I read you earlier, the Minnesota Police and Peace Officers Association has released a statement. Irresponsible, reckless rhetoric from political leaders attacking law enforcement has real and dangerous consequences for officers on the street. When officers are vilified, demonized, or used as political props, it does indeed fuel hostility, emboldens bad actors, and does put lives directly at risk. And that is most certainly true. And I'm going to play this piece of audio yet again because I do believe that it is incredibly important, because there's people that are saying, oh, ICE overreacted or whatever it is. Well, there's this witness who says that ICE was impeded by the actions of Renee Good and others.
They clearly wanted her out of there because she was the main car leading the protest, is my understanding. I talked to another guy who was driving behind her, but she was very successful in blocking traffic. She was doing what she was set out to do, and so they wanted to get her the hell out of there. Yeah.
So it looked like she was impeding ICE vehicles.
Definitely, yeah. Okay. That was her goal.
And you know what? And CNN, I can't get over this story. Yeah, she was, blocking traffic with her SUV for 3 minutes. We don't know why she was in the middle of the road. Lord have mercy. By the way, from Wall Street Journal. Almost immediately, various groups with causes as diverse as socialism, communism, climate change, Palestinian rights, and the Democratic Party launched what seemed to be a coordinated protest online and in American streets using similar language. The effort by left-wing groups with no obvious shared cause echoed protests over the weekend when many of the same groups sprang into action in the hours following the U.S. capture of Venezuelan dictator Nicolas Maduro. It is the same network of people that have thousands of Americans blocking the streets, waving communist and terrorist flags, attacking law enforcement and innocents, and burning the American flag, which we have seen, says Brandy Shafitsky, director of the Education and National Security Program at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, saying they are stoking the grievance industry that they built. And that is exactly what the Democrats do. It is all about the grievance industry, and it is my opinion that things are actually going pretty well here in America. The economy is rebounding. Crime is dropping because of Donald Trump and what he's doing in places like Washington, D.C. and Memphis. You have, as I said, the economy is getting better. More people are joining the military. There's a lot of really good things that Donald Trump is doing. So what do the Democrats have to do? They need to stoke that grievance industry so that they can continue to cultivate this party of victim mentality so that they can see the chaos in the streets, because that is the only way the Democrats are able to thrive these days, is if there is chaos in the streets. So this is not an accident. And if you heard Jacob Fry, if you heard Tim Waltz, if you heard people online yesterday, that is all that they were doing, is they were accusing ICE and Donald Trump and Tom Homan of murder. There's a lot more straight ahead. By the way, 724, we do have Senator Marsha Blackburn. She's going to be joining us at 736. And we've got the news at 730 with Jay Harper. Jay.
Yeah, Dan, as you've been talking about here this morning, tensions indeed running high in the wake of the shooting involving the ICE agents up in Minneapolis. Also, the president now giving his latest and perhaps new thoughts on Venezuela. That's all coming up at 7:30 on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
Thank you, Jay. Dan Mandis here for King and Associates. Listen, if you want to save money on insurance, check out my friends at King and Associates Insurance. Now, many of my listeners have reached out and let me know that they have been able to save and save big with King and Associates Insurance. Now, if you're looking to save money in 2026, call these folks. One guy that I know, his 16-year-old daughter got into a car accident. They still saved him thousands of dollars when the time came for new insurance. Because at King & Associates Insurance, they do understand that life does happen. And as independent agents, they can find you the best deal for your family. They're going to weed out the non-competitive companies and find the best options for you, and keeping the communication flawless. Now, here's the deal. How do they save you so much money? Well, what they do at King & Associates is they know it's not only relationship. Good morning to Senator Marsha Blackburn joining us live on WTN. Senator, always great to have you on. I know our time is limited. Let's talk about the topic that everybody is talking about, of course, the shooting yesterday in Minneapolis, Minnesota. I know you have some thoughts. We'll talk a little bit more about what you want to do with the situation regarding the Somalian fraudsters. You're active in that situation. Going to talk about that, but just give me your first blush on the shooting yesterday in Minnesota.
And that shooting is very tragic. We all know that any loss of life is tragic. And we also know that the officer watched this individual weaponize their car and then come toward the officers. That officer made that decision. He feared for his life and that of his fellow officers. And so he moved forward, and Secretary Noem has supported him, so is the president. And I know there will be a full investigation, but truly a tragic situation. And I think it's important to realize that the ICE officers are there because Tim Walz and the mayor of Minneapolis are not working with them. And of course, taking into federal custody these individuals with orders of deportation are individuals that have indictments of fraud against them. It would be much safer if they would work with them, if some of these apprehensions took place within the confines of the law enforcement facilities, but in Minneapolis, they are not doing that.
Senator, I thought it was interesting. So Tim Walz, I played some audio earlier where he is talking about how there's no coordination with the federal government and ICE. And I thought that was interesting because it's like he's trying to blame the Trump administration for not coordinating with them when the reality is that they are not coordinating with ICE. It's like the locals in Minneapolis, whether it's Jacob Fry or Tim Walz or whoever, they are intentionally not accepting a coordination from ICE because we know that here in Tennessee, in Memphis, there's been amazing coordination between federal authorities and local authorities. And look how well Memphis has turned out.
Well, that's exactly right. And many people look at Memphis as the model for how you move forward. A police chief, a mayor, local officials that are working with the Tennessee Highway Patrol, the TBI, the National Guard, and with the 20-plus federal agencies that are on the ground helping to apprehend these criminals. They've made about 5,000 arrests. They've taken 800 illegal firearms off the street. They've recovered about 500 stolen vehicles. They've recovered 133 missing children. And it has happened because of that coordination, and I'm very grateful for the way Memphis has moved forward. In Minneapolis, they will not work with them, and you have ICE agents who are there doing their job. And because of that, they're having to go into these communities and apprehend these individuals that have broken the law. And you see this tragic situation that occurred yesterday. And I look at the fact that in Memphis, yesterday was the day 100, Dan, of what has taken place, this Memphis Safe Task Force. It marked day 100. Every single day, I monitor what is happening there. Day 100, we have cut the crime rate in half in Memphis, Tennessee. And these individuals, because of our wonderful U.S. attorney there, Michael Donovan, and the surged attorneys out of DOJ and ICE and different agencies so that we can get these criminals into court and seek these convictions. And many of these individuals will end up being locked up in the federal prison. You remove these gang leaders, these drug dealers, these pedophiles, these sex traffickers, and you clean up these communities when you remove these individuals with ill intent.
Senator Marsha Blackburn is joining us on Super Talk 99.7 WTN. As far as the fraud that is going on in Minnesota, I know that you've, obviously been watching this because you are pushing for new legislation that would apparently modify an existing decades-old law that ultimately would lead to the denaturalization and deportation of some of these Somalis that have been committing this fraud.
Yes, and of course, as the fraud story broke in Minnesota and you saw how wide and deep it was, and then you started to hear about it in other states, and in Mississippi, their trial on fraud, very similar fraud, lower dollar amounts, actually started this week. We started looking at how it would affect people that had been naturalized citizens or were in the country on visas, as green cards, legal status. And what we found was that the Nationality and Immigration Act needed to be tightened up because there were mentions of fraud in different places, but there was nothing that made it explicit that the crime of fraud, any fraud, and the law had it fraud only over $10,000. So we have modified the law. It will now be any act of fraud against the United States, against these local and state jurisdictions, and it will require that these non-citizens, naturalized citizens, green card holders, permanent residents be apprehended when there is that accusation and indictment on fraud and held, and any court can handle that denaturalization hearing. So that denaturalization would become immediate and would follow with the immediate deportation.
It is sad. I mean, they're taking advantage of the generosity of America. And whether we're talking about, fraud, like monetary fraud or, immigration fraud, there's a lot of that as well. And so I think that part of what the Trump administration needs to do, and I think that we're all realizing, and you just touched on it, how rampant this may be. I mean, this is why the Trump administration has said, okay, California, Illinois, I think there's a couple of other states as well. They're putting the brakes on some of this funding so that we can figure out just how rampant this fraud is. I mean, Senator, to be honest with you, it's horrifying and scary.
Well, it really is, and it is not only in the child care programs, but it is in elder care programs. It is in daycare programs. It is in drug addiction, homelessness programs. You're seeing and hearing, and there are an incredible number of whistleblowers, some of them in the communities, and some that are working in state government, like in Minnesota. They continually try to get the attorney general and the governor to pay attention to this, and they refuse to either acknowledge it or to investigate it. And so by tightening up this fraud standard, what we do is say all of this fraud is a crime. You don't have to go in and just see, does it hit this certain limit? It is all a crime, and it would call for your immediate denaturalization. And you mentioned the other states, and $11 billion in funds going to California, Colorado, Illinois, New York, Wisconsin. These funds have been frozen because there has been reported fraud that is there. So I think what you're going to see is state legislatures and governors are going to turn their attention to going through all of these programs to make certain that the nonprofits that are getting these grants, that the agencies that are utilizing these funds, that they're dotting their I's, they're crossing their T's, and that the programs are truly meeting the needs of the vulnerable. Right now, what we have seen in Minnesota is the ticker is up at $9 billion right now, and the number grows every single day. And then you're looking at these sham companies, and people are saying, how is it that this could have happened, that there could have been no oversight, and how do we root this out? So at your local and state level, there's going to be a good bit of participation for rooting this out and making certain that indeed, as federal funds are transferred to the states and then to these local agencies and nonprofits, that everyone in that pipeline is a good steward of the hardworking taxpayers' dollar.
Senator, I know there's so many things that I want to talk to you about, and our time is limited. Very much in the news today. Top of the headlines on CNN, other than the shooting in Minneapolis, is the possible purchasing of Greenland. The president, the Trump administration, has said they're not taking military action off the table. Broad brush, what's your thought on the possible purchase of Greenland?
Broad brush there, Greenland is a strategic location for us militarily. We already have a presence there. In Greenland itself, the 55,000 residents that are there are wanting to seek their independence from Denmark. It is appropriate that we try to bolster our relationship with Greenland because of the positioning between Russia, between Europe, and the strategic importance of Greenland to our military and national security efforts. I think what you will see is the president will try to get NATO members, Denmark, Greenland to the table and talk about how we most effectively have a partnership with Greenland in order to protect the United States and to look at the strategic importance of how we build out our Gold Dome, which will be that missile defense system that the president is focused on.
Senator, that's all the time we have. As always, love to have you on, and a lot of things going on, and appreciate your perspective on all of them. Senator Marsha Blackburn on Super Talk 99.7 WTN. The Super Text line is open, 615-737-9986, 615-737 WWTN. You know, it is interesting. We all know Senator Blackburn is running for governor.
Marsha!
Oh, would you stop it?
I couldn't.
What is wrong with you?
Couldn't help myself.
Anyway, but one of the things that I was going to ask her, but I just, there's so many things. I did want to ask her, all right, so as a governor, do you feel like the inflammatory words of Tim Walz are appropriate at a time like this? I know what her answer would have been, so I didn't bother to ask the question. But, you know, clearly what Tim Walz had to say yesterday following the shooting, clearly inflammatory. He is now calling in the National Guard. CNN is now reporting, this is just to get you up on the very latest, CNN is reporting that the vehicle that was driven by Renee Good was blocking the intersection for 3 minutes as ICE agents were trying to get through. And, of course, that led to the ICE agents telling her to get out of the car. She refused. She stepped on the gas, and she was headed towards an ICE agent who then, in my opinion, an act of self-defense, pulled the trigger 3 times. And Renee Good, a mother of 3, including a 6-year-old, is dead. And I agree with Scott Jennings and many other people out there with a lick of common sense who say, listen, people are calling this a tragedy. It is absolutely a tragedy, because a mother of a 6-year-old should not put herself in a position that is dangerous. You have a responsibility to your children. So, yeah, it is a tragedy, absolutely preventable. Renee Good's wife, by the way, is out there saying that she, as in the wife, kind of forced Renee Good into this protest or whatever it is that you want to call it.
She was out filming the outside of the car and everything.
Yeah. If you were watching the video, I think it was her that was, you know, screaming at ICE agents and so forth. It's full of expletives, if I'm not mistaken. So I'm not going to air it, can't air it. It's horrifying enough to watch it. Don't need to hear all that this morning. But
her intent was to record that stuff and post it for the likes and for the shares.
Well, that's exactly right. And as Scott Jennings said, you know what? When did First Amendment right to protest include jumping in a car, jumping in a convoy, and trying to stop federal agents from doing their job? So, you know, to me, and if you've been listening all morning long, you know where I stand on this. You're probably not surprised. This is a horrific, terrifying, stupid situation that she put herself in, and she drove that vehicle right towards the police officer. She was turning the wheel to the right, but the car did bump the officer, and he did fire, in my opinion, in self-defense.